Okay, welcome people that are here.
Okay, we're live, everyone.
Welcome the people that are here in the room at the community center, and welcome to our people that are at home on Zoom. We appreciate everybody being here. These are wonderful gatherings and we're thrilled to have you here. I am Ellen Ferreira. I am the president of Democrats of the Red Rocks. We have these breakfasts monthly and they are educational breakfasts. We are hoping that people will learn from them and be able to take this knowledge and use it out in the real world. We have 4 amazing speakers today. As you know, because you read the notice, obviously, because you're all here, this week is 1 year since President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act. He's doing a great job.
Yes.
The Inflation Reduction Act is huge, but with all this craziness in the news and what's happening, and it's been a year now, a lot of people don't remember what the Inflation Reduction Act is, or that it even passed, or that it was passed with 0 Republican support. 0. No Republicans voted for this bill. It spends a lot of money on communities and on people, and it does an amazing amount of good for the world. Before we get into the Inflation Reduction Act, and I want to tell the people at home at Zoom that we have a beautiful birthday cake here that says "Happy Birthday IRA." Someone walked in this morning and said, "Who's Ira?"
I did.
You're supporting the Irish Republican Army?
The Irish Republican Army. I want to make a few announcements first before we get to our speakers. September 8th, there will be a fundraiser for Congressman Ruben Gallego. It will be here in West Sedona. You can, where's a good place, Toby, where's a good place for people to, DORR has sent out several notices about the event. It will be from 4:30 to 6:30 on September the 8th. All of the funds are going directly to the Gallego campaign. As you know, Congressman Gallego is campaigning to be the Arizona senator elected next year, so that Kirsten Sinema, the independent, is not elected next year. Ruben Gallego, he will be here September 8th, and he's been to the Verde Valley several times already, so that's a really great sign. October the 9th, my birthday, we will be having a liberal ladies lunch. This is put on by After the March Indivisible. Location to be determined, but put October 9th on your calendars because we will be circulating and for signatures the reproductive rights petition that has been so long in coming that will add women's reproductive rights to the Constitution in Arizona. Very important. If you're interested in doing petitions circulating, let me know. Call the DORR office. I mean, we'd love to have you do more petitioning. And yes, George.
Our
Mails are welcome. Yes, yes.
There are certain organizations where that is not.
No, mails are welcome. We would love everybody to be circulating these petitions. We need approximately 500,000 signatures. So that's happening. 1 year in November, the weekend of November 3rd, 4th, 5th, DORR will be holding a fundraiser throughout the Verde Valley. That weekend is 1 year before the 2024 elections. DORR will be needing still to raise money. We have rent, we have lots of expenses, and we want to go into this campaign fighting hard. What we're doing is holding a series, not a series, but people who volunteer to be hosts or hostesses of parties, large or small. We're thinking cocktail parties, but it could be a brunch, it could be coffee, whatever you like, in your home. And invite your friends, and we will sell tickets to your party. It can be as small as 8 people. It can be as big as however big your house will accommodate. But we want to we want to bring the community together. So this isn't just a fundraiser, it's bringing the community together so that we can get to know one another and be more cohesive. You can invite your own friends. You can do it that Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's called 1 Year Out Countdown to Democracy. So think about if you would like to be a host, contact me, contact Toby, contact, there's any number of people, the DORR office, Mama.
I was just gonna say that if you don't know who the Dems in your neighborhood are, I can help with that, so you
Right.
can invite them.
Right. If you don't know who the Dems in your neighborhood are, let us know. We can help you locate them. And we'll ask people, I mean, people may want to be placed at parties. So think about that. If you would be a host, that would be great. And we also need volunteers. You're having a disco party, Kathy. House Vista Montana. That would be fine. We have a disco party and a ball. Okay, so let me see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, I just want to do a little bit of a recap. Our our June breakfast, do you recall, was about youth and the importance of the youth vote. I just wanted to report back to you that Sandy Immerso and the student that she teaches, Kevin, who is a student at Red Rock High, will be doing a voter registration drive. We have learned that if the drive is initiated by students, it's generally more successful. They have been to training, both of them, Sandy and Kevin. Kevin is going to get a partner. He's meeting with the principal today to talk about this. And so we're really excited for a voter registration at the high school sometime this October. We were the first ones to sign up for this event. So I'm really excited about that. So many thanks to Sandy and to Kevin. Okay, why are we learning about the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA? Why are we learning about that today? Because it's really good and because it gives Democrats a chance to give a compelling narrative about what are we doing. If people say, well, what's Biden done? I don't know that he's done anything. Maybe they're not that informed. We need to have answers at the tip of our tongue that we can respond and say, what about this? What about your Medicare costs? What about about insulin costs? What about clean energy that's happening and these credits? We need to know about this. So Democrats of the Red Rocks is not only celebrating the 1 year anniversary, but we also put out a newsletter called Being Posted. And that is exclusively devoted to the Inflation Reduction Act and all that it does. You will find it on the website of democratsoftheredrocks.org. And it's a beautiful newsletter and is written by one of our members, Janine Reno, who does fabulous research. It's very easy to read, easy to digest, and it will give you some answers so that you can have coherent, good discussions. As I said, not a Republican voted for this. In fact, yesterday, Nikki Haley referred to it as the Communist Manifesto.
What?
Yes. Yes, it is disgusting. According to Politico, however, and this is really interesting because it's so the opposite of what the Republicans did when they were in power. 2/3 of the major projects that are funded by the IRA are in Republican districts. And the Republican leadership and representatives are showing up at the ribbon cutting ceremonies and smiling for the cameras as though it was their idea, when they all voted against it. It's incredibly disingenuous, but there you have it. So we can't let them control the narrative. We have to control the narrative, and to do that, we have to be knowledgeable, and that's why DORR is putting on educational programs like this. The IRA, just to summarize, does 3 major things. 1, sustainable energy investments. And we're going to hear about all of this from our speakers. 2, affordable health care. And 3, promoting tax fairness. So a lot of the money that is going to fund the projects coming from through the IRA are funded because it includes a 15% minimum tax rate for big corporations. They're finally going to pay some of what they owe. By raising taxes on the very wealthy and the corporations, the IRS Internal Revenue Service is now being fully funded, and they are going to make it easier for us to pay our taxes online, but most importantly, they're going to be able to go after these big guys who are not paying their fair share. That's really critical. So the White House did its job in getting the legislation through. Now we have to be the ones to amplify it. And when we are confronted by somebody who doesn't know what good things that are happening, we have to say, I beg to differ. There's a lot of good things happening, and this is some of them. So it's up to us to write letters to the editor and be loud and proud. Okay, the panel today, we've got 4 speakers. The first 2 are going to speak about the environmental impacts of the IRA. The second 2 are going to speak about the medical care, medical cost impacts. So Shelley, is Grace Smith on the call?
Yes, she,
Yes.
I saw her there.
Yeah, I'm
Yes,
here.
yes, she's here.
Okay, great. Grace, welcome. Welcome to Democrats the Red Rocks and to Sedona, Arizona. Thank you for being here. Grace is an attorney with the Environmental Defense Fund, where she worked to develop something called an Inflation Reduction Act tracker. And she's going to tell us about that. It looks at federal agency actions that have been taken as a result of the act. We are not having a blackout here. The lights are just off. No, that's good. That's okay, Toby. We'll have Grace, and then we're going to have our second speaker, Adrian Keller. Adrian is the a Phoenix resident, and he's Arizona director of the something called Solar United Neighbors, SUN, great acronym, better than Inflation Reduction. And so that Solar United Neighbors is a 501c3 nonprofit, and it represents the needs and interests of solar owners and supporters around the country. And as of yesterday, I am a solar owner and supporter. We moved to a new house and we are fully solar, so that's great. So let me introduce Grace. There she is. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks so much for having me, everyone. As Ellen mentioned, my name is Grace Smith, and I'm an attorney at Environmental Defense Fund. At EDF, I work primarily to cut climate pollution by pushing for stronger limitations on the oil and gas industry emissions. But over the past year, I've also been involved in EDF's work to increase awareness of the Inflation Reduction Act and its climate provisions for the American public. So it's really exciting to be here to talk to you about the IRA, because we've been just working really hard to, like what Ellen's doing with this webinar here, to increase awareness about the IRA and what it means for the climate. The IRA is America's biggest climate investment to date. It just turned 1 this year, but there's already lots to celebrate. So I'm glad you all have a cake there with you in Sedona. The law is already creating jobs, bringing investments to communities, and is offering resources that will really impact people's lives while protecting against climate change. So to help people better navigate the law's many climate-related provisions, EDF, my organization, and Columbia's Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia Law School, we created a database and progress tracker called iratracker.org. The tracker is a free public resource that helps people find and benefit from the many new programs and tax incentives that are rolling out as a result of the law. So whether it's cities building climate resilient parks, or companies investing in factories that create thousands of new jobs, or individuals getting tax credits to improve home energy efficiency and lower their costs when they purchase electric vehicles. This tracker is tracking all of that from the time agencies are issuing guidance and documents to create the programs, all the way to when the programs come out for the public to be able to use the grant funds or tax incentives, whatever. And so as we've been tracking the IRA, we have been able to see all of the agency actions that have been taken that are already getting the ball rolling and creating an impact. And that's just really critical because the IRA is expected to cut US greenhouse gas emissions below 2005 levels by 42% by 2030, or up to 42%. And so, yeah, we've, in using this tracker, just seen so much progress already. And I would love to talk to you today about the progress that we have seen. And then I would love to show you the tracker and show you how to use it so that you can stay informed about what's going on, but also perhaps benefit from the IRA's climate provisions. So let's talk about the big numbers first and the overall picture, and then we can talk about some specific examples. Already in the first year since the IRA became law, it has turbocharged US manufacturing. The EV, the electric vehicle industry, for example, has announced $93 billion of investments, more than half of all investments made in this sector in the last 8 years. And this investment is expected to create more than 84,000 jobs in EV and battery manufacturing alone. So far, companies have announced plans for 65 new or expanded electric vehicle manufacturing facilities in Savannah, Georgia, Montgomery, Alabama, Auburn Hills, Michigan, and a ton more places. Also, in just under a year, companies have announced or moved forward with projects accounting for more than 170,600 new clean energy jobs in 44 states for electricians, mechanics, construction workers, technicians, support staff, and many others, totaling $278 billion in new investments. So plans have included 91 new battery manufacturing sites in places like Tucson, Arizona, Rochester, New York, and more. American companies have also restored almost 350,000 manufacturing jobs in 2022, and that's a 25% increase from 2021. There's an analysis by the Blue-Green Alliance and the Political Economy Research Institute at the University of Massachusetts, which shows that projects that the IRA will create over 9 million clean energy and climate-related jobs over the next decade. If we focus on Arizona, in particular, we're seeing a lot of progress in the state with $8.3 billion in investments that have helped to create 12,700 clean energy jobs in the state. And I'm sorry that I'm throwing all these numbers at you, but it's just really, really significant, and wanted to highlight them. One company in particular, though, is LG Energy Solutions, which produces EV batteries in Arizona. In June 2022, the company put its $1.4 billion Queen Creek facility on hold when the Build Back Better Act failed to pass. But following the IRA's passage, it announced it would invest $5.5 billion in the previously paused factory. An executive at the company said the company was adjusting plans for the project to meet the growing demand for US-made EV batteries that qualify for Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. And so we're seeing that in response to the IRA, companies are really feeling confident enough to put those investments into place. So I think that covers some of the overall picture, and there's a lot more that I would love to talk with you about today, but it would just take up a lot of time. And so I'd be happy to share with Ellen materials and reports that we've collected that have analyzed, and EDF has conducted some of our own, that have analyzed the IRA's overall impact so far. So I can share those with Ellen. Maybe she can email those over to you all. But now wanted to dive into some specific examples of how the IRA is starting to impact people's lives. So first, the IRA is making it easier and cheaper than ever to purchase electric vehicles. Car buyers are eligible to receive a $7,500 tax credit when they purchase a new EV. And though this tax credit was available before, it was capped. And now because of the IRA, it's uncapped so that even more Americans can benefit from this tax credit. There's also a new $4,000 tax credit for used EVs, which would essentially give buyers a 30% discount. A recent study by Environmental Defense Fund and WSP that we published just yesterday or 2 days ago on the anniversary of the IRA found that EVs on the market right now could save vehicle owners up to $18,000 and $18,400 over the lifetime of the vehicle. Consumers who buy an electric car generally save up to $1,400 per year, since powering an EV is less than half the price of fueling a gas-powered car at the pump. So this will have significant impacts for the climate in the aggregate. As more consumers buy EVs and demand increases, there will be an increase in supply and investments in the industry, as we're already seeing companies, like I said, responding to that new demand created by the IRA. But aside from climate progress, this boom in EV supply will also help consumers save their money. So as Ellen discussed, it's really important to talk about, not just the climate benefits we'll see, but how this will actually impact people's lives. And when it comes to EVs, it will really help consumers save money. Second, several IRA programs fund the adoption of clean energy solutions and home efficiency upgrades. Overall, the IRA has the potential to lower electricity bills for homeowners with savings between $270 and $320 per household by 2030. That's expected by 2030. And already the administration has started implementing programs to help folks save on their home electricity bills. For one, EPA has started offering up to $7 billion in grants to states, tribal governments, and nonprofit organizations to provide residents with solar energy in their homes. The U.S. Office of Housing and Urban Development is also providing $837 million to provide homes with cleaner indoor air and make public housing developments more efficient and climate resilient. IRA tax incentives are also available to help pay for home energy audits so that homeowners can understand which upgrades, which would also come at a discounted price because of the tax credits, would reduce their energy costs. And then finally, another thing I wanted to highlight is that the DOE has created an energy savings hub to connect homeowners with the tax credits that are available for installing upgrades like rooftop solar, electric heat pumps, and electric stoves. So again, these programs are really a win-win for the climate and consumers by providing residents, in that they provide residents with clean energy while also saving them money. And then finally, I wanted to highlight that several IRA programs, for some reason, and we've seen an initial just outflow really of programs that are helping build a sustainable future for our communities and our water systems. For example, the Biden administration recently announced a $50 million grant to the Gila Indian River community and other water users to support water conservation and sustainability efforts in the Colorado River system, which supports much of the Southwest. The grant will protect Colorado River reservoirs against climate change-driven drought, and it's expected to add nearly 2 feet of elevation to Lake Mead and boost conservation to ensure that families and farmers and others that use the system have clean drinking water. Another grant will provide 11 Native American tribes that are being forced to relocate due to climate change with $40 million to support their relocation efforts. And the administration just announced the new tribal electrification program, which will provide electricity to unelectrified homes on tribal lands and connect homes to renewable energy systems. So yeah, that's a lot of information and just goes to show you, I think, that there's so much happening that doesn't even, cover half of it. So the next thing I wanted to do was show you our IRA tracker, and I'll try and share my screen here. Let's see. I've done it on Teams before, but not on Zoom. So oh, I see. It's a little green button down here. Let's see. Can you all see my screen?
No, we see you.
You.
Okay.
Once you hit the green button, you have to select what you want to share and then hit share screen.
Okay, got it. I think. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh.
Awesome. So this is our Inflation Reduction Act tracker. When you go to the homepage, you can see we have two different websites. The first is a database, and the database lays out all of the climate related provisions. So it won't include any of the healthcare or, it will include tax provisions, but it won't include the non-climate related tax provisions. So everything here on our IRA tracker just covers the climate provisions of the IRA. And you can see on the database, it's organized by which federal agency is responsible for implementing that program. Congress directed dozens of agencies in the Inflation Reduction Act to implement these programs. And so in response, the agencies are starting to implement them. You can see Department of Energy is responsible for 17, Department of Ag for 14. You can really see the big hitters are going to be DOE, Department of Ag, Department of Interior, and the EPA, and then of course the Department of the Treasury, because of all the tax incentives that the IRA has. So if you click on Environmental Protection Agency, for example, you will see without the filters, all the list of the most recent. It goes from most recent to at the top, and you can filter by eligible entity. So that means like what entity would be eligible for either the tax incentive or for the funds that the IRA program is offering. So there's corporate entities that could be eligible, local governments, states, property owners. When you think about like the home efficiency upgrades and things, you'd select property owner, technology developers, companies, vehicle owners. Those are the eligible entities. And then you can also select for whether the provision expressly refers to environmental justice considerations. That's really important for our community beneficiaries. And then you can conduct a keyword search as well, and you can sort by the IRA section. If you know the provision that you want to track, you can write it down and then either search for it in here, or you can sort by section. So this database is not updated weekly. It's what we created when the IRA first came out, and we updated it thereafter a little bit, but it's not updated weekly with ongoing agency implementation actions. If you go back to our homepage and then go to IRA Tracker, that is more where you'll find the most recent updates about the IRA's climate programs. So again, you can filter by agency. You could not do that in the database. We're going to be fixing that, but in the tracker, you can filter by agency. And then you can filter by IRA section. Again, if you know the provision number that you want to track, you can conduct a keyword search, filter by eligible entity, and then filter by explanation. I think that requires an explanation, and we need to change the title of that because it doesn't really make sense. But this is like, what type of action do you want to track? So if you're looking for an agency guidance is usually or the agency explaining how a program will be implemented. If you're looking for a regulation, you can select that regulation. A lot of the IRA provisions, Congress required agencies to pass regulations. And so you would select that if you're looking for a regulation. A proposed rule, that's the stage before it becomes a regulation. You can select for that. And then request for information, there you can see there are a ton of those. Those are more informal comment periods where the public can comment on a program that an agency is developing. And then the thing I think that would be most relevant to everyone is agency announcements. Agency announcements tracks all of the like grant and funding opportunity announcements. So if they're opening a grant program, or there's been an update to a tax incentive and the tax incentive is now available, those will be seen when you filter for agency announcement. Let's see what else. And then, so let's see, if I mentioned the audit, you can see that the IRS has issued guidance on the home energy audit that I was talking about. And if you click on that, you can get an explanation about what that is. And then there's some links below for additional resources if you want to read those. And usually those links will take you to information on how to access the tax credit, and in the case of grants, how to apply for grants. And that's about it. If you have recommendations for how we can improve our tracker, you can leave a message on the contact page as well. So yeah, really, we're making improvements to the tracker over the next month, especially now that we've socialized it a lot and people are starting to use it. EPA just highlighted the tracker at one of its funding fairs. So it seems like people are starting to use it, and that's really great. And there's a few other really great trackers out there, and I can send those as well to Ellen. So yeah, I really just encourage you to use it to stay informed and play around with it and see how you can benefit from the our climate provisions. Yeah, so that wraps up my presentation. I hope it was informative and helpful to you all. I'm really excited that we're already seeing so much progress, already 1 year in. The IRA is just getting rolling, and it will already creating jobs and spurring the economy and starting to fight climate change, and it will continue to do so over the next several decades. So as Ellen mentioned, we'll need to continue fighting to ensure we have the right people in office that will see the IRA through, because if we don't, all of these programs will either be stalled or reversed. So really appreciate all of your advocacy and for having me on today. And again, I'll share materials with Ellen, and you can follow up with me over email if you have any questions. Thanks so much.
So much, Grace. We appreciate that. That's really amazing. This tracker is just amazing how much it can do. Great job.
Yeah.
When she was talking about those numbers, those are billions with a B, not M, not millions, billions throughout this whole thing. So it's pretty amazing. Okay, now we will hear from Adrian Keller from Solar United Neighbors son. Okay, thanks. Hey, Adrian.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invite, and happy 1 year anniversary of the passage and signing of the Inflation Reduction Act. Get my presentation ready here for you. Just want to verify that everybody can see and hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
That's Shelley's.
All right, wonderful.
That's Shelley.
My name is Adrian Keller. As Ellen mentioned, I'm the Arizona Program Director for Solar United Neighbors. I'm based out of Phoenix. I oversee all of our co-op programming throughout the state of Arizona, in addition to our education, policy, and advocacy campaigns in the state of Arizona. If you're unfamiliar with Solar United Neighbors, or SUN for short, we are a national nonprofit organization with field staff in 12 states, as well as DC and Puerto Rico. We organize primarily around solar policy issues. We ourselves are not a solar installer. In fact, we're a vendor-neutral nonprofit organization. We focus on consumer advocacy, solar education, and outreach in the community. In short, our mission is to help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. A really big part of how we do that in Arizona is organizing solar co-ops, which you may have heard of before. These are group purchasing campaigns for multiple households to go solar together at the same time at a bulk discount through one competitively selected installer. So Solar United Neighbors, we organize the co-ops and help people with education, technical advice, any assistance they need. We're in the business of making it easier and cheaper to go solar in Arizona. Since 2007, we've been able to help more than 8,100 families across the United States install solar panels at their homes or business. Together, that's more than 70 megawatts of solar, and very proud that we've offset more than 1 million tons of CO2 through all of these installations. And just since 2019, we've helped 500 people in Arizona go solar through our co-ops, and they've installed just over 4 megawatts. We just crossed that mark yesterday, which is really exciting. And what's especially exciting is that our members are going to save combined more than $20 million in energy savings as a result of these solar panels. So today I'm going to give a brief overview of what the Inflation Reduction Act is. At Sun, we're mostly focused on solar, so I'm mostly going to be focusing on the solar parts of the bill. I'll touch a little bit on some of the energy efficiency and electrification incentives that Grace mentioned. And then I'll finish up with some solar equity and energy justice opportunities. Throughout this presentation, I'll be using IRA, which stands for Inflation Reduction Act, just to make sure everybody is on the same page. So the top line figure here, the IRA appropriates more than $369 billion in climate and energy initiatives. This is truly the largest, most consequential, and most important piece of climate and energy legislation the country has ever seen. It's truly unprecedented level of investment that will dramatically reshape how the US generates and uses electricity over the next several decades. It's also the largest single investment in the solar industry in the US's history. It's projected to reduce US emissions by around 40% by the end of the decade. And it's expected to help more than 7.5 million families install solar on their properties that may or may not have otherwise been able to install solar without the IRA. It's also going to enable millions of people to electrify their homes and businesses, increase the energy efficiency of their homes, and transition to electric transportation. The White House estimates that the average family who takes advantage of the incentives in this law will save over $1,000 per year. Again, kind of depending on which programs they take advantage of. So that's an average figure. Rewiring America, for example, they estimate that families who take advantage of even more of the programs and are able to install solar, a heat pump, and an electric vehicle could save more than $1,800 on energy costs every single year. And one of the things that doesn't get talked enough about, in my opinion, is the public health benefits of this law. Through significant emissions and pollution reduction, the IRA will help prevent more than 3,900 premature deaths and up to 100,000 asthma attacks annually by 2030. If you stop to think about that, like that alone is such a massive impact that this law is going to have, and make it easier for families to breathe and have cleaner air. There's a lot of physical stuff that is going to need to be built over the next few years. There's also hundreds of programs that will need to be implemented and administered. Millions of Americans will be put to work because of this bill, with many jobs not requiring a college degree. And we're very thankful that the bill includes dozens of components, programs, and funding streams that will direct this funding in an equitable manner. So the families and businesses and households who could use this assistance the most are able to access the funding. I'll start with going over the solar incentives in the IRA. Believe it or not, these are just some of the solar incentives. We're mostly focused on residential solar here at Solar United Neighbors, but there are some additional incentives for like really large utility scale solar as well. But the most important, probably, if I could pick a single policy change that the IRA made that's going to directly impact our work at Sun, is the residential investment tax credit. So this is a 30% tax credit that individuals who install solar can claim on their taxes next year. If the IRA had not passed, this tax credit would have expired at the end of this year, and we would be seeing significant reduction in solar installation instead of a significant increase. Importantly, this only applies to individuals who pay federal income tax. So if you are a senior with no income or you are a low income individual, who doesn't pay federal income tax, unfortunately, you're not able to claim this credit. However, you can roll it over to multiple years. So if you have a very small federal tax liability, you go solar, you can claim the credit, roll it over for multiple years. This also now applies to battery storage, which used to be the case, but you had to get battery and solar at the same time. Now, if you already have solar and you just want an add-in battery, you can get a 30% tax credit for that as well. The investment tax credit also applies to commercial installations. So a business or for-profit company or a utility who wants to install solar panels. It's the same base 30% tax credit for the same amount of time, but there are 3 additional adders in here that could increase that tax credit to up to 60% for certain projects. So for solar projects located in former energy communities, which an energy community is a community that has historically relied very heavily on fossil fuels for jobs, livelihoods, and maybe also have impacted by fossil fuels. So think like a town that used to be a former coal mining site, coal mine's not there anymore, people need work, that would be an energy community. Developers can get an extra 10% for projects located in low income census tracts, and another 10% if they use solar panels that were made in the United States. So there's a huge incentive here for developers to not only build more solar, but build it in the places that would really, really benefit from that investment in their communities. One of my other very favorite parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, this is something that Solar United Neighbors in particular lobbied for very heavily when this bill was under consideration, is something called direct pay. So before the IRA, if you were a nonprofit like a house of worship and you didn't pay taxes, federal taxes, there was no way for you to claim any sort of federal solar incentives because you can't get a tax credit if you don't pay taxes. So the IRA changes this around a little bit. So for the first time, tax-exempt organizations can receive a cash payment in lieu of a tax credit. So church, for example, using this picture as an example, they go solar, they will file documentation with the IRS, who will send a check or a direct deposit into their bank account. This is going to be a huge, huge assistance for a vast variety of nonprofit organizations that before didn't have any really incentive to go solar. And now this is going to help take off 30% or more of the cost. So this applies to any entity that doesn't pay federal income taxes. So a 501c3 organization like Solar United Neighbors, houses of worship, governments, local governments, water districts, school districts, tribal entities. This is such an exciting part of this bill. I've already seen dozens of churches and schools who have reached out to me saying like, hey, we can finally go solar, we can finally afford it. Can you help us kind of walk through the process? So this alone is going to make a huge impact in Arizona. All right, and then to touch a little bit on the energy efficiency and electrification incentives in the law. It's pretty interesting. You think about 2 years ago, nobody really knew what a heat pump is. And now I hear about heat pumps every single day. There's a lot of people who are excited about electrifying their home. They want to reduce gas use in their home for public health impacts, but also to save money. So if you need to install a heat pump, battery storage, a heat pump water heater, an electric vehicle charger for your home, if you need a new electrical panel, your main service panel, or any sort of weatherization, think like insulation, better windows, there are tax credits available for these technologies. But again, those are tax credits, so it doesn't do a lot to help people who are low income and don't pay federal taxes. So very thankful that the bill also includes rebates for everything listed above, in addition to electric and induction stoves, electric wiring, and various energy efficiency improvements. The rebates are only going to be available to people under a certain income level. We don't have all of the details now of exactly how this is going to work, but it will be administered through each state energy office. And Sun has been in really close connection with the Arizona Office of Resiliency, our version of an energy office, to kind of work through how this is going to be implemented. They gave an estimate that the rebates would probably be available in Arizona, like the very beginning of 2024 at the earliest. So excited to see those roll out. Now, more and more Americans are are deciding that their next vehicle will be an electric vehicle. I feel like I see more and more on the road every day, which is really exciting. Not gonna lie, this incentive is a little bit more complex than it used to be. So as Grace mentioned, there's a $7,500 tax credit for new electric vehicles if they are assembled in North America, if a percentage of the battery minerals came from the US or a country the US has a free trade agreement with. And then a certain percentage of the batteries itself have to be assembled in North America. So this part of the bill was really designed to increase the affordability of electric vehicles, but also clearly to incentivize American manufacturing. EPA has a great list at fueleconomy.gov of the current makes and models that meet these requirements. There's also a $4,000 tax credit for used electric vehicles. The first time we've seen this. Again, there's an income requirement to be able to qualify for that, and it only applies for the first time a vehicle is resold. And then as Solar United Neighbors, equity and environmental justice is something that we take very seriously. We want everybody to be able to reap the benefits of solar energy, not just wealthy white homeowners. And so we're very pleased to see a significant funding in equity and environmental justice programs in the law. A really big one is the environmental and climate justice block grants. These are going to be a variety of different grants that we'll see throughout the next couple of years, but really focused on community-led pollution monitoring, prevention, and remediation. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a really big pot of money that includes a bunch of different exciting programs to help communities reduce their emissions. Something included in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is something called Solar for All. This is a federal program that each state is applying for that will help low-income families in particular be able to install solar panels. We're working with the state of Arizona right now on their application. We're requesting $400 million to help 30,000 low-income families install solar panels, which is just unbelievably exciting to think about all those families that will be able to have solar and have help paying up for their electric bills. Like I mentioned, there's those various adders on that tax credit that incentivizes developers to build projects in communities that would most benefit from the jobs and the economic activity, as well as tribal lands and rural lands. And then there's a lot in the bill for rural communities. Just touching on kind of two of our kind of favorite programs here at Sun. The Rural Energy for America program provides loans and grants for farmers and rural small businesses to go solar. It used to be capped at 25% of the project cost, but that's now at 50%. So a significant help for farmers to be able to go solar. There's also funding available for a similar program, but specifically aimed at home electrification and energy efficiency. There's another big pot of funding to help rural electric co-ops. So in Arizona, we've got several. If you don't live in APS, SRP, or TEP, your utility is probably an electric co-op. And so there's a big pot of money to help them transition to clean energy as well. And then the National Green Bank, this is a program that will provide grants to national clean energy funding institutions to provide financing to tens of thousands of clean energy projects across the US. Some quick resources here that might be helpful. I definitely want to add that tracker that Grace talked about to this list of resources. Rewiring America has a really awesome calculator where you can put in your household information, your income, and it will basically tell you all of these different tax credits and rebates that you might qualify for. Solar United Neighbors has a page on our website dedicated to the IRA, where we go into everything I talked about, just into a little bit more detail. And because so many of these programs are implemented through tax credits and tax incentives, the IRS is actually an extremely helpful resource to understand how a lot of these programs are implemented. Just to close out here, if you are excited about any of the things I've talked about today, I hope you are, and you're thinking about how can I take advantage of these myself, certainly please spread the word, tell your friends and neighbors that these resources are available to them. If you are somebody who's able to consider going solar, this is an excellent year to do it, and Solar United Neighbors would love to partner with you to make that happen. If you already have solar, consider adding a battery, additional panels, electrify your home. If your stove's about to go out, consider getting an electric stove and claim that credit for it. Talk to your favorite local nonprofit. Let them know they can get 30% off the cost of installing solar finally through direct pay. And tell a farmer or a rural small business owner that they can qualify for a REAP solar grants. And as always, Solar United Neighbors is here as a resource for anybody who has questions about any of the programs we've talked about today. I will end it there. Happy to share this presentation with anybody who'd like it, and I will be available to stick around for questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Adrian. I generally delete things from that say solar something because I think they're selling something, but Adrian's group is not selling anything. They are just providing information to help the public make decisions and trying to get partnerships so that neighborhoods can go in together. Is Grace still on the call, Shelley?
No, it looks like she dropped off.
Okay, I know she had to leave. Let's take some questions. Cora, you have one, and then Kathy.
We've installed solar. My next vehicle is going to be an EV, but a lot of people have hesitations because my car is going to mostly be charged locally, and I'm going to set up a charging station in my home about the progress with chargers around the country and for distance driving. Can you address anything about what's happening maybe under the IRA in terms of the progress with chargers around the state as well as around the country?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that. So in the Inflation Reduction Act, there's not too much specific to electric vehicle chargers, except for that home electric vehicle charger tax credit I mentioned. In the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed just before the Inflation Reduction Act, there's $7.5 billion in that bill to build out a nationwide network of fast electric vehicle charging stations. So if you're unfamiliar, you can plug your EV into a regular wall outlet. It's going to take forever. Most people get what's called a level 2 EV charger for their home that plugs into like an outlet that your washer or dryer would use. But these public fast chargers can charge a vehicle from, dead to 80% in less than 30 minutes. So where we're kind of at in the progress is each state has submitted their initial plans for where they want to put these chargers in their state. So in Arizona, ADOT, Arizona Department of Transportation, is leading that cause. They've actually been doing an excellent job. We're pretty pleasantly surprised by how thorough and robust their outreach has been in asking community members, where would you like to see these chargers? So from what I understand, they've submitted that initial kind of plan to the federal government, and I think we're kind of in a waiting stage at this point, but extremely excited to start seeing those chargers being installed around our communities. They're mostly going to be on state and federal highways to start with.
Thank you.
Okay.
Here in our community, many of the homes fall within homeowner associations. That adds a level of bureaucracy toward installing solar. So 3 questions related to that. The first is, can you help people navigate that? The second is, would HOAs count as a nonprofit that would be eligible under, you had some of the incentives and nonprofits were listed. And the third question, related to that is, part of the problem in HOAs where people need help is in getting clearance because of additional weight on a roof or outside, whatever. There needs to be an engineering sign off on that. Do you have a path to help people that might want to navigate that?
Yeah, excellent questions. So the first one, can we help? Yes, absolutely. As Ellen mentioned, we're not a sales organization, we're a nonprofit, and we really just want to provide tools and resources to help people go solar as they need. So if that's a situation that you're in, like, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to kind of help remediate the situation. Arizona has a state law in the books that says an HOA cannot prevent you from installing solar. They are allowed to have some sort of review process, like a design review board, for example, But the Court of Appeals has upheld this law and has said an HOA cannot outright prevent you from installing solar. So we're really thankful that we have that protection here in the state. To your question about direct pay, which is the incentive for nonprofits to go solar, likely it would all kind of depend on their tax status. So if they are a 501c3, basically if they're an organization that doesn't pay federal income taxes, they would likely qualify, but it's really going to come down to what their tax filing status is. And then yes, so with the, I forget what your third question was.
Engineering, you need to sign off for weight, part of the architectural reviews that HOAs do.
Right. Yeah. So exactly kind of what I was talking about, like they are allowed to add in some extra steps into the process. And so, yeah, Solar United Neighbors is available to assist with that. Each situation is probably going to be a little bit unique. Some HOAs, it's a breeze to get solar through, and some really want to drill into every single step. So I would kind of say, like, as needed, like Solar United Neighbors is absolutely able to help assist people with that. We also have relationships with dozens of really good, high quality installers in the state of Arizona. So if it reaches a point where there's something that there's no really further action Sun can take, we also have a wonderful network of people that we can plug you into to help with that situation.
Thank you.
See, Helen Knoll has a question.
Thanks. I have two questions that are quite different. One is, there's a goal in the act of 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. That seems, I'm sorry, wildly aspirational. Is it just aspirational, or is this real? And then the other question I have is, it seems like a no-brainer that the state of Arizona should be not just a US leader, but a world leader in solar technology and installation. Are we proving to be a leader?
The short answer is no. So I don't want to cite the wrong statistic, but I was looking at it yesterday. I believe Arizona ranks 6th in the US for number of solar installations, which, to your point, is ridiculous. We have some of the best solar energy potential in the entire world, especially in northern Arizona. Actually, it's a really, really ideal climate for solar technology. So unfortunately, no, we're not the leader that we should be. A big reason why is because the utilities, especially APS and SRP, are not big fans of rooftop solar. If you kind of think about it, that's really the only kind of competition that they have. They're monopoly utilities, so we don't get a pick. The only sort of other choice of energy we have is generating our own. So at the Corporation Commission, which is the agency that regulates our utilities, unfortunately, especially this year, they have approved reductions in the amount of payback that you get for rooftop solar, and a variety of other things that have, I would say, weakened like the regulatory environment where solar could really flourish, like it is in a state like California or even Oregon. So a big reason why is the Corporation Commission. It's a 4-1 Republican majority right now. And unfortunately, they tend to favor the arguments of the utilities. So I would encourage your group, please encourage people to vote for the Corporation Commission. If you care about reducing costs and expanding access to solar, it's incredibly important. To your first question about the 40% reduction by 2030, is that aspirational or is that actually going to happen? It's a really good question. I would say like that goal, I think, is absolutely attainable. The big question is like, how do we get from here? Like, we've got all the funding, we've got these billions of dollars flooding into our community. How do we actually like do the hard part of building out all of that infrastructure? That's really going to be the difference between whether we reach this 40% goal by 2030 or not. And it's also partly going to depend on each individual state, I would say. Some states have a lot easier process for permitting and approving solar installations and wind farms. Some states are very opposed to those types of things. And so if we are able to build out as fast as we possibly can, then yes, that 40% target is absolutely attainable. But I'm not going to lie to you, it's going to be very difficult, and there are going to be some bumps on the road. There's so much infrastructure that we as a country will need to build out to reach that goal. And that's not always an easy process, but I think it's attainable.
I'd like to make a comment. My brother is from Kansas, and he texted me one day and said, "You live in Arizona. Why don't you have solar?" And I thought, I don't know. So we connected with a solar company, did a little research, and this year we installed solar, and we say in $450 this month for air conditioning, we got a credit of $20.
Wow.
So the question I have is, why didn't we do this 15 years ago? And I think everybody on this phone call, on this Zoom, needs to go to a solar company, because, you know, we got the 30% tax credit and they got it done in just a short period of time. The only thing that made it time consuming was APS approvals.
Right.
They really drug their feet.
Yep. Okay, so that is another reason the Corporation Commission is so important. And when we talk about who we want to elect and need to elect and work for, the Corporation Commission is really critical. Julie, I can't take any more questions right now. Adrian, we got a lot more people that want to ask you questions. However, we still have two more presenters that will talk about the medical portion of the IRA. This is an amazingly mind-blowing achievement. And the fact that this didn't happen 15 years ago, I mean, the fact that it could happen today with the polarization that we've got is just amazing. So I would like to introduce, and Adrian, if you could stay on the call, if you don't mind, because maybe towards the end, if we want to stay a little bit later, we will be able to get back to the environmental part of this, which is fascinating. We could do a whole subject, a program just on this. I want to introduce Dr. Alan Lazaroff. Sorry, Lazaroff. Dr. Allen he's coming to us today from Denver. He started practicing geriatric medicine 45 years ago. He was on the board of directors of the American Geriatric Society. It has won numerous awards. He will be talking to us pretty much about the Medicare portion of this. But of course, his greatest credit right now is that he was recommended to us as a speaker by our own Judy Dulles. So thank you, Judy. Welcome, doctor. We appreciate having you here.
Thank you, and greetings from Colorado. And thanks for inviting me to the party. And we're going to see if we can share my screen. And let's.
Hey, we see it.
I'm going to see if I can go to the slideshow version. Yeah. There we go. Get rid of this. Can you see that all right?
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, giving credit where credit is due, these slides are from the Kaiser Family Foundation, kff.org, which is a wonderful source of this kind of information if you wanted to do a presentation. This is the best, easiest place to get it. There we go. So, there's no secret that people are concerned about the cost of drugs. This has been much in the news. And in terms of Medicare drug programs, there are very significant changes that are part of the Inflation Reduction Act that will help people to afford their medications more easily. So here's a list of the principal provisions in the Act. We'll go through this and then we'll talk about the individual provisions in more detail. So for the first time, the federal government is going to negotiate prices for some very high cost drugs under Medicare. This is new, and the pharmaceutical industry is fighting like hell against this There are lawsuits going on. It's sort of unusual to think about negotiating with the federal government, which usually tells you the price. That's the nature of negotiation in healthcare. It requires drug companies to pay rebates if they raise prices faster than inflation. It eliminates 5% coinsurance for catastrophic coverage in Medicare Part D next year and adds a $2,000 cap on Part D out-of-pocket spending for 2025, and then limits annual increases in Part D premiums for from 2024 to 2030. This is a very big deal for people who have to take extremely high priced drugs. We now are seeing drugs that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And so even a 5% portion of that can be a very significant obstacle for people who need these medications. It's a game of your money or your life. And they're addressing that. It limits monthly cost sharing for insulin products to $35 a month. It expands the eligibility for Medicare Part D low income subsidy full benefits. It eliminates cost sharing for adult vaccines. This is particularly important for the shingles vaccine, which you ought to get it. All of you ought to get it if you're over 50, I guess, and which I see many of you are. I survived from looking at the pictures, like myself, and that was an expensive vaccine, and now you're going to have it for no copay, and it delays implementation of a very lousy Trump administration drug rebate rule. So what's the timeline for some of this? Well, this year, the drug companies are going to have to pay rebates if the prices rise faster than inflation. It limits the insulin cost sharing is limited to $35 a month in Part B and D. Now, first of all, that's for each insulin product, and some people need to use several different types of insulin products. So each of those is $35 a month. Part D is your outpatient drug coverage. It was initiated through legislation in 2003 during the George W. Bush administration. It was bipartisan, but has some distinctly Republican characteristics when it was passed, and those are gradually being eliminated, as we'll talk about in a minute. Part D is for drugs that are administered in the doctor's office, like some cancer chemotherapy or immunological modulators for things like rheumatoid arthritis and so on and so forth. And again, now starting right already, costs and coverage for adult vaccines are improved. Next year, it's going to eliminate the 5% co-insurance for Part D catastrophic coverage and expand the eligibility for low-income benefits. In 2025, it'll add a $2,000 out-of-pocket cap for Part D. And then starting in 2026, we're going to see the results of negotiated prices for drugs as specified here, starting with 10 Medicare Part D drugs. And they're supposed to announce next month which Medicare Part D drugs will be the first ones to undergo this process, for whom the prices will reflect that in 2026. So negotiating drug prices is a complicated thing. As you could well imagine, there are lots of rules and principles about this. This is not for drugs that have a generic or biosimilar advantage or recently approved drugs, some certain small biotech drugs like orphan disease drugs, drugs that don't cost very much to Medicare, et cetera. And the number of drugs that will be subject to negotiation are as listed on this slide. And by the way, Ellen has the slides, so if anyone wants to spend some time with them, you'll be able to do that afterwards. How do you establish a negotiated maximum fair price for Medicare? These are all the factors that are going to be taken into consideration. Things like how much does it actually cost to produce and distribute the drugs? I mean, for the most part, the cost of making the drug, once the research is done and and it's been approved and so on, the actual manufacturing costs are usually a tiny fraction of the payment for the drug. The drug companies are being compensated for the cost of research and so on. That's where most of the money is actually supporting. They're going to consider how much federal financial support was involved, whether the drug is really a big advancement or not, whether there were alternative treatments and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of considerations. The pharmaceutical companies don't want to negotiate at all, so they're suing. They are the least regulated, basically unregulated in terms of price of any part of the healthcare system. They have been able to charge what the market would bear for the most part. And there are penalties if that would be imposed for companies that failed to participate in this process that would make it highly unprofitable for them to try to do that. So these are very significant changes. They have to pay rebates for drug price increases above inflation. And so, you know, typically of Medicare regulations, it sounds very simple. It's quite complicated in reality. And, you know, there's a whole set of rules that are being developed to define exactly how this will work. So capping Medicare Part D out-of-pocket spending and other Part D benefit changes. So for beneficiaries, these changes will eliminate this 5% coinsurance for catastrophic coverage. Now, what's let me back up for a minute. There are three things that a beneficiary, ways you can get stuck for out-of-pocket costs. First is a deductible, which is what you pay before the insurance kicks in. Second is a co-payment, and a co-payment is a fixed price, for example, that you pay when you fill a prescription or for other medical services. So it could be, you know, $5, $50, depending upon what the service is, but it's a fixed amount. And the third and most dangerous situation is a co-insurance, where you pay a percentage of the overall price, not a fixed dollar amount, but a percentage. They're going to eliminate this 5% co-insurance, which for some people, as we'll see, can lead to very high expenses under the current law. It will cap the out-of-pocket drug spending at $2,000 beginning in 2025. One important feature is, instead of having to pay all the money up front until you satisfy the deductible and so on, it will permit you to pay it a 12th every month, so that for people who are on a tight budget, they don't have to come up with a large sum of money all at once. And it limits the premium growth to no more than 6% per year from 2024 to 2030. So these are all nice benefits for the public. For Medicare, it lowers the amount that Medicare is going to pay for the above the out-of-pocket spending cap, because it's going to increase the share of that amount to the plans rather than Medicare paying the plans for that. And it modifies the share of costs below and we'll see that in a minute, below the out-of-pocket spending cap. It requires a price discount on brand name drugs from the drug companies and modifies the the amount that they share in the lower costs. Let me see if I can. I don't seem to be able to move this down. There we go. So, okay, this is a little complicated, but I guess it'll help us to understand this. So the law passed, the original Part D passed in 2003, and it went into effect in 2006. And so under the current law, if we look at the left, you have this deductible where the beneficiary is responsible for 100% of the costs, although in reality, a lot of these plans, I think the majority of these plans don't have a deductible. They're allowed to modify this scheme so long as the actuarial value of the way that they do it is equal to the scheme that is set up here. Anyway, then you had, after you had that deductible, you had an initial coverage. And if you look at the orange, that's the percentage that you or me would pay for the drug up to the initial coverage limit, and it was 25%. And then you had the infamous donut hole. You may remember that, the coverage gap in government speak, the donut hole for the rest of us. And starting with the Affordable Care Act in 2010, the donut hole was phased out. So there is no more donut hole, and you pay currently the same 25% of that. But the big changes occur after you hit that threshold, which is currently roughly $3,100. After that, the enrollee pays 5%, the Medicare pays 80%, and the plan pays 15%. Starting in 2024, you, the beneficiary, will pay nothing after that, and the Medicare will pay 80%, and the plan will pay 20%. And then in 2025, the full reform will come in, and the enrollee will again pay nothing above that. The drug manufacturers will pay 20%, and the plans will pay 60%. So they're shifting cost away from you to the drug company and to the plans. And that's all going to be in effect starting in 2025. So limits to monthly cost sharing for insulin and Medicare. Well, the first thing we have to understand is insulin is a 100-year-old drug. So how, and yet people can be paying enormous amounts of insulin for insulin. Now, it's not the same insulin that we had 50 years ago, which came from cattle, pancreases or whatever. Now it's all human insulin, and there are all sorts of variations of how the insulin is put together, what the course of action of the insulin is, how fast it starts working, how long it works, and so on and so forth. And also another thing that the drug companies have done is to integrate the delivery system into the insulin sale itself. So you can buy the insulin in a pen, which makes it easier to deliver, but by having unique delivery systems, it's allowed them to extend their patent protection and charge these very large amounts for insulin, which is really a life-sustaining medicine for people. And, it's really kind of outrageous what's been going on. So now for 2026 and beyond, starting now, the limit is $35 per month out of pocket for each insulin type a person needs. And again, some people need 2 or 3 different types. And then starting in 2026, it's going to become subject to these other rules. And in fact, once this got into the air, some of the drug companies that make this started doing the same thing for their commercial patients as well. So there's going to be an overall reduction in insulin costs for people.
Dr. Lazaroff?
Yes.
It's Ellen. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. We still have one more speaker and time is getting short.
Okay. Let me finish up if I may. So I'll
okay, if you would do that, and then if you would stick around afterwards for questions, that would be great.
I'll be glad to stick around.
Thank you.
So the last thing is the vaccines, which now you won't have a copayment for the vaccines, and we'll skip this one, and I'll stop here in the interest of time. So thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much. There's obviously so much in this act, it's hard to just encompass it all. Plus, we don't even have anybody talking about the increased taxes for corporations, which is a whole third element to this thing, and the improvements in the IRS functioning. Thanks, Dr. Lazaroff. I would like to now introduce our final speaker, Adam Hoyer. Adam is the National Organizing Director for Protect Our Care. He has been the organizing director since 2017. He is also an organizing specialist and campaign specialist, having worked for both Obama campaigns. So that must have been great. All right, Adam, Adam, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you see and hear me all right?
No, we're still looking at Dr. Lazaroff's slide.
Oh, maybe.
So, Shelley?
I'm trying to figure out how I can stop his screen share. I've got Adam highlighted.
Dr. Lazaroff, I think you may have to be the one to stop. Oh, great. Welcome to Sedona, Adam.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate you giving me a chance to talk to you about the healthcare provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act. And I know we're kind of up against on time, but luckily, a lot of the healthcare provisions are those Medicare pieces that Dr. Lazaroff was talking about. And one thing that I really want to instill here is sort of how we talk about it. And you mentioned I was on both of Obama campaigns, and I was also on the campaign to implement the Affordable Care Act. I think I'm sure a lot of you remember well, if not fondly. And a couple of takeaways I want to glean from that, because I think they're very, very applicable here. Those of us who tried to implement the Affordable Care Act, and look, it's a wonderful piece of legislation. We all love it. It's doing so much good right now, and we've built on it in a lot of great ways, including through the Inflation Reduction Act. But when it was first passed, I feel like the rollout did not go that well for a few reasons. One, we didn't do a great job, and I say we, the collective progressive community and the blue team writ large. And that's, because talking about healthcare is difficult. It's wonky. It's in the weeds. Use a lot of terms that a lot of people tune out on. And I think coming out of that bill too, a lot of us really, really lefties, we're a little disappointed we didn't get the public option. We didn't get the mandate that states expand Medicaid. The subsidies didn't go far enough for affording insurance. So I think there wasn't the enthusiasm that we ought to have had coming out of that. And as a result, the right did what the right does, and that is they went ahead and filled that void for us with lies and misinformation and unfounded attacks, talking about socialized medicine and putting a bureaucrat in between you and your doctor and socialized medicine. All lies, but we allowed it to happen. So all that to say, I think it's really important that we get educated about what the healthcare provisions are in this. And thanks to Dr. Lazaroff, I think he and the Kaiser Family Foundation are really, really good resources. I implore everyone to check them out even more. And I think that we have to keep talking about it, because I think this, like the Affordable Care Act, is going to be a thing that we ought to build on over time. And I already saw one question about the $35 a month cap on insulin that's just for Medicare and not for younger people. Yeah, unfortunately, we lost that battle, but that doesn't mean that we can't add it later. And I think that's one of many things that we can build on top of the IRA that's already passed in the future. But the only way we do that is to convince people that what's in there already is good and it's working, and it's the thing that we need to expand. Some feedback. The biggest components of the Inflation Reduction Act healthcare provisions are those Medicare pieces that Dr. Lazaroff was talking about, especially on the drug cost provisions. Allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices are super, super popular. And in fact, when we did polling, and others have done polling, 4 of the 5 components that are most popular are around those drug pieces, including capping insulin costs for seniors to $35 a month, including giving Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices on other drugs, including capping drugs at drug costs at $2,000 for individuals, and including lowering health insurance premiums. That's the one component that is not Medicare related, which I'd like to talk about for a little bit. I mentioned the Affordable Care Act. And of course, like one thing that was really helpful with that was that there were subsidies that allowed people making a certain amount of money to afford their premiums. They offered tax credits to those making up to 400% of the federal poverty level. The American Rescue Plan, which of course is a year before the IRA, extended those tax credits to people making more than 400% of the federal poverty. And now the Inflation Reduction Act extends those expanded subsidies through 2025. They're set to expend at the end of they're set to expire at the end of last year. They're now extended through 2025, which is great. 1 in 4 people can now find a plan at absolutely no cost to them. Consumers are saving an average of $500 a month on health insurance premiums. It's a huge deal, but it's a thing that people might not realize why it's happening. At this point, it's so ingrained into the healthcare costs. It's hard to remember a time before them. But I think all the more reasons, the provisions are complicated, a lot of phasing in over time. It's not the easiest to message, but you've got this breakthrough legislation. In this case, we took on insurance companies in one. In the ACA, we took on insurance companies in one. In this one, we took on drug companies in one. I think that's a thing that is really easily to message and the best way to talk about them. Stick to the basics. Biden and Democrats took on big drug companies in one. Thanks to the IRA, prescription drug prices are going down. Insurance is more affordable. Seniors are huge winners with the $35 insulin caps and out-of-pocket costs and free vaccine shots. And now we see drug companies doing what they do. They're fighting the IRA with a barrage of lawsuits because they want to protect their outrageous profits and their ability to institute big price hikes on their most popular drugs. Dr. Lazarus mentioned what's coming up is CMS is going to announce the first 10 drugs that are eligible to be negotiated. That they have to be announced before September 1, and we think it's going to be not next week, but the week after. So that's another huge opportunity to talk about the drug cost savings that are coming people's ways. And of course, for their part, Republicans are standing right there with the big drug companies, cheering them on with these lawsuits and calling for repeal of the Medicare negotiation program. Even though it's saving people a lot of money, it's saving the government a lot of money. It's a huge, huge plus for the federal deficit. And it is such a winning message. People could not be more in favor of bipartisan support across the board. So I think if there's any takeaways from this, it is 1, educate yourself about these provisions, but 2, don't get too in the weeds when talking about it. It's a winning message just to talk about who the enemy was and drug companies and Republicans, and to talk about just drug prices going down generally, insurance premiums going down generally. And these things are only going to get better over time. So with that, I will stop. I apologize. I have a hard stop at the top of the hour. So I'm going to put into the chat a little resource packet that we put together with polling and messaging.
Is that a new one? It looks like
and social guidance. So I hope they're helpful for folks. And thanks again for letting me talk about healthcare for a few minutes.
Thank you very much. That was great. You're a fast talker. We enjoyed that. Questions? Okay, Lama, we have one here and probably some online too.
Does the IRA have any healthcare benefits for non-Medicare recipients? Or is it all Medicare?
Yeah, so the extending the premium tax credits, that's non-Medicare, that's everyone. But I think maybe to your point is like that already existed. The other one is starting on October 1st of this year, Medicaid and CHIP beneficiaries are going to have access to free vaccine shots in the same way that seniors now that got immediately.
Well, thank you.
Okay, George.
One of the main arguments that Republicans and drug companies make is regarding research, and that if you don't allow them to charge exorbitant prices, they will stop making vaccines because they're so expensive. And yet, what I've seen is almost all of the research is heavily subsidized by the federal government. Are there statistics that we can use easily that will help counter that kind of argument?
Yes, there are. In fact, as soon as I'm done, we've got a whole debunking piece on that. I'm glad you raised that because you're totally right. It's the argument that they're leaning into the most, and it's totally without merit. I'm going to do some digging. I'll find the research. I'll put it in the chat here. And the one thing I would say is whenever we hear that, the important thing is that negotiating drug prices is a thing that resonates with everybody. When you tell people about them, they're shocked that we're not doing it already. Everything gets negotiated. You're going to tell people that the drug companies were able to set prices until now, they're understandably outraged. So yes, the research and development argument is bunk. And also it's important to pivot towards, negotiating drug prices is so intuitive to so many people.
Molly, thank you.
Hi there. Do you have any idea what the 10 drugs that will be negotiated? Oh, you did. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't.
I saw a potential list last week when we.
Toby, is there anybody online that has a question?
I saw a potential.
No, there are no questions online at this point unless somebody posts something soon.
All right, well, if you have a hard stop, then it is 11 o'clock. What I will do is just tell people to go to the website, Protect Our Care. Adam has been there since 2017, and they are dedicated to making high quality, affordable, equitable healthcare a right and not a privilege. So we appreciate your doing that and all that you're doing in your work, Adam. Thank you so much for being here with us. If there are any questions for Dr. Lazaroff, we can stay and do that. Thank you so much, Adam. Dr. Lazaroff, we have a question here from Marianne.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So as a senior, every year you have to face this incredibly complicated shopping for Part D drug plans. Do you have any recommendations in light of all these changes that are coming on how to approach shopping for Part D this coming year?
That's a very good question, and there's not an easy answer to that. This is the price that we pay for choice. We say we want choice, but in fact, there's so much choice sometimes that it makes it almost impossible to decide what to do. You can look at which drugs are covered and try to match what you think you're going to need and use that as a factor. But I have to tell you that they're allowed to change their formulary in the middle of the year without notice. So it's a difficult problem. And of course, the other issue is now Medicare Advantage is more than half of the population of people on Medicare, and they generally have drug plan built in. And I will just say that I have my coverage is through a Medicare Advantage plan. I have zero premium, including for the drugs. And so from if a financial considerations are paramount, for most people, the better financial deal is a Medicare Advantage plan. And that's we could spend several hours talking about that. And for my money, I don't think you could say the care is systematically better or worse in a Medicare Advantage plan than it is in regular Medicare. So
I have a question.
We have a couple more questions.
Al, this is Judy. I have a question. What happened to your beard?
Well, it got shaved off, and I'm happy to respond to my esteemed friend and colleague, Judy Dollar. So it might grow back. We'll have to see. And the other problem that I have is, for some reason, when I'm on these Zoom calls, it makes me look bald.
George?
Actually, before you mentioned Medicare Advantage, I was going to ask you about that. I have seen from the left, and I tend to resonate with their arguments, that Medicare Advantage is actually a huge problem for long-term health care, because the costs that are built in, that is built on the profit motive of drug and insurance companies, and that it's ensuring that we're getting away from a one-payer healthcare system.
So this is an eternal argument, and of course, as you know, there are lots of different points of view about this. I think that the way I read the situation is that Medicare Advantage offers benefits to the patient that they don't get in regular Medicare at a higher cost to the government. And so it's people like it because it's better for them financially in many instances, but the government is probably paying more than what it pays for regular Medicare. So my comments a minute ago were just about looking at it from a purely personal perspective, but from a healthcare policy perspective, there's a very valid argument. The last thing I'll say about it is that once you've seen one Medicare Advantage plan, you've seen one Medicare Advantage plan. And they're not all the same, and it's can be very misleading. I happen to be in a very highly rated plan, and I think the care is excellent, but I couldn't say that that's true across the board. In Medicare Advantage, you can possibly get excellent care or terrible care, and the same thing is true in regular Medicare. So life is complex. There's no simple answer to this.
I have just one quick question. I take Eliquis, and I imagine a lot of people in this room either do or know people that do. And I have found that the price of Eliquis varies month to month, from $15 a month to about $80 or $100 a month. And 2 years ago, it was going up to $200 a month. Is there a reason for that other than they can?
Why the prices are going up? So
why the variation over a course of months?
Yeah.
Well, this is true in healthcare in general. I mean, there's no logic to healthcare prices in the same thing is true of how much a hospital pays if you're a patient gets paid if you're a patient of one insurance company versus another insurance company. It's really quite an irrational situation across the board. In the case of the drugs, it's just profit making. And I will say, we need a healthy pharmaceutical industry. I mean, and they're important. And if you look at the vaccine development for COVID, it was fantastic. But the problem is, and let me say, there are more and more of these drugs coming down with all this immunological stuff and interfering with the basic mechanisms of cancer that have fantastic potential. But how we're going to pay for it is a very good question, and it's something that the society is going to have to face one way or the other.
We have a question on the Zoom.
And it's from Dieter, and he said, we use the Medicare compilation calculator to help in deciding which plan. It gives total costs for our drugs for that year.
That sounds like a good approach.
He also said Advantage plans depend on where you're covered or not. And he said that he lived in Idaho Falls, and one of the Advantage options used doctors in Boise, which was 270 miles away.
Don't join that one.
No way. Clara?
Well, it sounds like parasiting.
Yeah.
I'm a nurse and case manager, and I have a suggestion. And I use straight Medicare. But if you look at the medications that you're taking and you've met your deductible for the year and you're in your open enrollment period and you're starting to look at plans, some of your medications through your providers can have refills on them. So I stock up in the current year, and depending on how many refills, sometimes they don't limit at the pharmacy and they will refill your medications in the current year so that you don't have to get medications in the coming year. So you can also figure out what you're going to need and how your expenses are going to be. And that's part of how I decide which plan I'm going to choose in the next year based on, especially if they're as needed. I take something for migraines only if I have migraine headaches. So you also look at the tier of the medications because the higher tier medications are the more expensive medication. But some of the as needed medications, if you can stock up on that, one of my triptans I had a whole year's worth of triptans and I didn't even need to list them and get them for the next year. So that's one way to try to save on costs.
Okay, thank you. Good tip. Anything else?
My perception is that my Advantage plan is awesome, really truly awesome. But that if I have a surgery, that I'll wish I had Medicare. Does that make sense at all?
I don't have that belief.
Okay. Because I'm getting dental and vision, and my dental cost $25,000 one year, and this year it's not costing me anything.
Wow.
Who's speaking? Who's speaking?
Carol Rinbaugh. Carol, could you
Yes.
just say what plan you're using?
Aetna.
Okay. All right, good to know.
But if you go off regular Medicare onto an Advantage plan, very difficult to get back.
No, you can't.
No, wait, let me address that. You can always go back from an Advantage plan to Medicare, but you may have a problem getting supplemental insurance coverage, a Medigap policy.
Right, because they do histories.
When you first go on Medicare, they have to issue you a Medigap policy if you want to buy one, and they can't underwrite you by your health. That's a requirement. But later on, after you've already been eligible for Medicare, if you choose an Advantage plan, you may not be able to buy a Medigap policy, which could leave you exposed to high costs. God forbid you get cancer, something like this, where you have co-insurance responsibility and you could be vulnerable to high costs under those circumstances. But you could always go back to Medicare.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor, for being here with us. We appreciate it so much.
Good luck to all of you. Stay cool.
For recommending him. Let me just highlight two things that were said by our speakers. One, Grace, the first speaker, mentioned what would happen if the Democrats don't retain the White House to all these programs. I mean, billions of dollars. What we're doing is helping the communities and helping individuals. We are not giving tax cuts to the rich. We are not playing around with banning books and all this other stuff. So that is critical. Another critical thing that Indivisible also says that Adam, our last speaker, mentioned was controlling the narrative. The whole narrative after the, what's it called? The Obama healthcare, give me an Affordable Care Act, right? They called it Obamacare like it was a negative to horrible thing. They controlled the narrative. They got out there fast. We cannot let that happen again. And that's why DORR wants to, make sure that we all know about this. There's the CHIPS Act, there's the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. There's a lot of things that are really good helping us as individuals and our community, but we have to control that narrative and be loud and proud and not worry about, well, what about Biden's age? Well, screw Biden's age. There's a lot getting done now, and we have to really emphasize this. Okay, I'll get off my high horse. Thank you.
I don't know if you know it, but they did a survey, and the vast majority of Americans loved the Affordable Care Act, but they didn't like Obamacare.
Yeah, right. Right. So there you go. All right, thank you all for coming. Next month we'll be here again.
General announcement that these are great breakfasts. They're so informative. Another great place to get information is at Ollie. So if anybody wants a catalog for the next semester, Chris has them.
And actually Kathy and Holly are doing a behind the scenes at the city council.
Oh.
In September, a workshop, so please sign up.
I didn't pay her for that commercial.
Thank you, everybody. Help yourself to some birthday cake.